VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, K Body and Mind, hosted by Amy Amantea with special guests Jasmine Chen, Donna Soares, and Conor Wylie.
So welcome to Almost Live. My name's Amy Amantea. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm the community outreach coordinator here for VocalEye and your host for the Almost Live events. And of course, I'm also a member of the blind community, and it's a privilege and an honor to be a member in such good standing with such fantastic people that I've met over the years of being in this community. I usually do a land acknowledgement, but tonight I'd like to welcome Deanna back into the space. Deanna is a VocalEye team member and is joining us as an intern from Adler University, and she's going to be here this evening to do our land acknowledgement. So Deanna, I will leave the space with you.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy and honored to be here with you. I've been around for the past 4 weeks or so, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm really excited to be part of the team. So thank you, Amy. I would like to do the land acknowledgement today. I'd like to acknowledge that we're presenting to you from the ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations people. Sometimes some people ask, what does unceded mean? And that's a really good question. So unceded means stolen or taken land from the originators of the land without permission. And it's a heavy word. It brings up feelings. And I think what I'd like to acknowledge today is that when those feelings come up, that's the moment for us to participate. To sit with that feeling and recognize that feeling, acknowledge that it's there. And I think that's the kind of awareness that moves us all forward as a country. So why do we do land acknowledgements? By acknowledging Canada's historical treatment of First Nations people, we are recognizing that the harm that was caused was genocidal harm, and it had really devastating consequences in the past, in the present, and also in the future. By recognizing this, we are honoring it as the truth, which is really important, and we're acknowledging the personal and cultural devastation that this caused. And by honoring, we are also understanding that the trauma has impacted the past 7 generations of Indigenous people. That's the length of time that the residential schools were in effect. And it will continue to impact people going into the future because of there's an unlearning process, and there's also a reclaiming process that First Nations people need to go through, and we can be a support to that by listening, by being honest about those things that come up for us. Do we have thoughts that come up? Do we have feelings that come up or questions that come up? And if so, it's great to talk about those things. You don't have to be an expert, you know, it's good to have awareness and to just be brave enough to sit with those feelings and ask the questions that are difficult to ask. We can try to understand the systems of oppression and understand the burdens that they have placed on First Nations people, Indigenous people, Aboriginal people. So thank you for having me here, and thank you for taking some time and space to acknowledge this important piece.
Thank you, Deanna. Those are words that I will continue to marinate on as I continue to learn and move forward with this process as well. So thank you so much for being open and sharing with this group. So friends, tonight is October the 20th, 2021, and we're proud to present to you our 60th, yep, I said it, 60, Almost Live event. Tonight, we're going to feature K Body and Mind. And K is just spelled with the letter K. If you're interested, K Body and Mind. And this is a new work of science fiction that's created by Vancouver-based interdisciplinary performance collective called Awake of Vultures. And our friend Conor Wylie, who's the writer, director, producer, all hats kind of person, is going to join us for the Q&A this evening. But who's joining us for the introduction is VocalEye's own Donna Soares, and we'll tell you why. Donna, welcome. Are you on mute, Donna?
No, I was just adding a spotlight to myself.
Oh,
hello.
Donna's doing double duty tonight because she's usually with us spotlighting and doing some behind the scenes work, but here you are as a special guest tonight. And Donna, why are you a special guest tonight? What is your involvement with K Body and Mind?
Well, the email I sent out actually says I'm a regular old guest because I'm here all the time. But I am talking more than usual today because I play one of the parts in K Body and Mind. There are two performers, Jasmine Chen and myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I love it. I always love it when we have actors in the space, because it's a different lens to be able to witness production through. So we're going to share with you all folks a little synopsis about what we're going to experience tonight. But from the actor's perspective, Donna, what was this journey like? Like, when did it start for you as an actor?
I believe I was going to check my emails to get the correct date. I believe I started in 2018, was when I first joined the project. And I think people are always amazed at how long it takes to make theater, that it's, years in the making, but, we're not working every day for years. A lot of the time you go in and you do a workshop and you're working for maybe 2 weeks, and then you take 6 months off or a year off, and people who are writing go off and ruminate and write some more, or you might come back and do a workshop and work on some movement. So yeah, I joined the process in 2018, I believe.
So yeah, 2018, 19, 20, 21. So that's about 4 years. And originally designed for the stage, with a live audience. Of course, COVID happened and we all pivoted quickly. Talk to me a bit about the pivot for this project, and of course, how that relates to you as a performer in this project.
Yeah, well, I think that as we were creating the piece, um, Connor, sorry, I'm getting distracted with my normal work and I'm just going to resist it. I'm going to let Steph do the behind the scenes work. So as we were creating the piece, Connor, I believe, started feeling like this was a piece that could live in a mini series format, and that was something he would explore at some point. And then that some point was kind of forced upon us. We had originally planned to premiere the show in fall of 2020, and we all know why it did not happen. And so the Shadbolt, rather than take that time away, very generously said, well, you can come in and work on the show some more. And so at that point, Connor said, okay. And Connor's here right now, so he can correct me if I'm saying anything incorrectly at the end when he comes back. But he said, okay, well, let's try to make this a mini series and see what happens. And so we did that, which is what you're going to see today. And then the plan is to bring it back with a live version and perhaps a hybrid version. And then there's even other versions that are coming up, but maybe I'll let Connor talk about that some more at the end.
That's going to be a really exciting discussion to get to. As I embark more in my own artistic practice, which is in addition to all the other stuff that I do, I start to learn about all of these things that I didn't know about, because I often have been an actor that takes a script and I'm only involved at that point, and then at 3 weeks of rehearsal and then you perform and you're done, right? But as somebody who develops work, and we'll talk about this with Connor in a bit, how that process works, and how many times you go back and forth, and then where does it live? And an artist once said to me, a project is never finished, it's only abandoned. Right? It's like you can take it and you can do so many different things with it. You just have to have the time and the space and the money and the desire and all of this to figure out what you're going to do next with it. So it'll be really exciting to find out what maybe some of the next iterations of this project might be. Jasmine was not able to join us this evening. I still believe that she's not going to be able to join us this evening, but y'all heard Jasmine's voice last 2 weeks ago in Someone Like You, when we did the audio drama Someone Like You. So Jasmine was a voice artist in that particular piece. So I almost feel like she's in this space kind of honorarily. But Donna, you're performing, you and Jasmine are both, they're two actors in this play, but you're performing many characters. Talk to me about that as a performer, in terms of your process and how you distinguish those characters through voice, or I don't know, what's the process for that?
Yeah, well, when we started, we didn't even know who was playing which character. So both of us explored the physicality and the vocal nuances of each character and played around. You'll hear from a boss, you'll hear from someone named Esper. So we both, and then Kawabi. And so we all played in the room with how these characters might sound. And then there was one script where there were probably upwards of 25 characters, but it's much more pared down what you'll see tonight. So it is certainly a challenge in terms of trying to find different ways to differentiate the characters that you're portraying. Yeah,
And
and
what
hopefully
was
we
it
do a
like?
good job of that.
And what was it like? You know, again, you're a stage actor. I know you also do film and television, but this idea of filming on a stage is like, it's like the combination of the two mediums, because that's what we're all going to experience tonight, is you and Jasmine performing on stage. It's being captured like it was a movie almost, and being shared with us and then described by Eileen. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, it was tricky for me, even though I work in both mediums, because this is such a heightened world that we've created. It's not the same kind of acting style that I'm doing, say, on Riverdale or The Flash. You know, it's a different style in itself. So I certainly had to ask Conor on day one, I think, when he was watching the dailies, is my face okay? Is it too big? I didn't really know what the world was, and how much I could move my face. And so that was certainly something that we needed to check in about. And we were really lucky. You know, a lot of the times on set, I am just there for the day and don't have a lot of power and don't feel comfortable, you know, asking to see the dailies. But, you know, with this group, it's really easy just to go and see what's happening and adjust.
So tonight we're going to witness, this was broken down into 3 episodes. We're going to play all 3 of them back to back. So there may be a little hiccup between, but we're making that a smooth a transition as possible. And then we'll bring Conor back into the space and have a little chat. But I want to just read to you all a bit of the synopsis before we jump into this. So set in 20XX, a security specialist named Kawabi, played by our own Donna, wants what everyone wants: to leave behind the scars of sickness, hunger, and war, and lead a new life in a new body. She joins The Grove, an idealistic startup with a fleet of bioengineered and shareable bodies. But when a hostile entity hacks the Grove's network, colonizing the minds of the bodies of its inhabitants, Kawabi must rescue her new home by reckoning with a ghost of the past. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And I think Conor and I had this discussion once, that he kind of said to me, if you're confused, you're meant to be, right? Like, you're not, you know, so as a blind audience, if you find yourself confused, know that everybody is confused, because the story is maybe not linear. It's laid out sort of in a different way. So stick with it through the journey. And then, of course, we've got Conor with us afterwards to ask questions of, which is such a fantastic thing to have in a space like this. So Donna, any final thoughts before we hit play?
Have fun. And yeah, like Amy said, just stick with it. You might be lost, but just go with it. And also let your imagination run wild. I think Conor really created a piece where he encourages that and wants you to picture what is happening.
Awesome. With that, friends, you were going to sit back for about 80 minutes or so and experience K Body and Mind. Rick, when you're ready, please hit play.
VocalEye Almost Live, K Body and Mind. Viewing of the audio described film is possible by special request through emailing info@vocaleye.ca, info@vocaleye.ca.
Okay, friends, welcome back. That was K Body and Mind by Conor Wylie, who is in the space with us now. I know he's here somewhere. I'm waiting for the square to arrive. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Conor to appear for our Q&A, I'd like to just remind folks that this is your opportunity when we have Conor in the space to ask questions. Donna also is not far by, so if you have questions for Donna, we invite those in the space as well. Anything you heard tonight, any questions you have about the story, It's pretty interesting to try and picture yourself in a space in the future that doesn't exist. But those of us who love sci-fi kind of love that that idea. We already have a hand up from Megan. So Megan, I'm gonna ask you if you want to oh, there you go, unmute. Megan?
No, when you...
Oh, yes.
There we go. Oh, well, hang on, Megan. Before I ask your question, I just want to say hello to Connor, who's now officially joined us in the square.
Sorry, I just quickly jumped from one computer to the other so I could wear my headset.
It's kind of like Hollywood squares that way, you know. You just you never know who's going to appear in the square. So, welcome, Connor, to the space. And we already have a hand from Megan. So, are you okay to just jump right on in?
Let's jump in.
Let's jump in. All right, Megan. What's your question or your comment?
I think you did an amazing and amazing play, especially with Donna in it. She did I mean, Donna, you did really, really well. Congratulations, and to you, Connor, because that was amazing, especially with Kawabi. But it sounded so awesome, especially with the sound effects, with the electricity going, you know, and the electricity going everywhere. It's like, wow, oh my gosh, man, it's awesome. When did you started doing sci-fi, Connor?
Thanks, Megan, wow, thank you. That's so many nice things you just said. When did I start doing sci-fi? It's funny, I feel like I've loved the genre for a long time, but I didn't know that I was going to get into it. But I think the first one that I did that was in the sci-fi genre was called Visitors from Far Away to the State Machine, which was with my friends, a company called Hong Kong Exile. I think that was back in 2015 that we did that. And ever since doing it then, it's just come up again and again. And now it's kind of one of the main things that I do is write science fiction.
Man, I love it. Absolutely love it. Oh,
Thank you. God. Thank you. And I agree with you that Donna is awesome in it.
Oh man, yeah. I met her and she is amazing. Aren't you, Donna?
And Jasmine's amazing in it too. We'll just say that.
Too. Yeah.
We'll just say that too.
She was the one that played Stacy and Esper.
Yeah, Casey and Esper. That's right.
Yeah, Casey and Esper.
Yes, she does. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, what would I do with that wonderful sci-fi? I mean, is it going to movie? Like actually going to a real movie? That would be awesome.
Well, since we have Connor in the space with him, I mean, Connor, I'd love to hear from you. First of all, thanks, Megan, for your question. But I'd love to hear a bit about the process of K-Body and Mind, because as we talked to Donna earlier, it started as a stage conception, a conception piece. Then you had to pivot. So maybe talk from your perspective about what that process was like. For you as the writer, creator, I don't know, the all hats wearer of this production?
Sure. Yeah. I think Donna was totally right earlier. She said a bunch of things. She was like, oh, Connor will correct me later, but she said a bunch of correct things already. But it's true that so Theater Replacement, who are kind of like my mentor company, they brought me on as an artist in residence in 2018 to start working on this, which is when Donna got involved as well. And we did a first excerpt that's basically the form of the first episode, was kind of what we did. We staged that first. And we staged it we did a sort of in progress showing at the Russian Hall. And then afterwards, so the two of my collaborators, so Dan, who does all the lights in the show, is also the filmmaker. And Nancy Tam does all the sound. And so we documented it, and as soon as we documented it, I knew right away that it was really interesting on camera. There's a really interesting performance style. Because your question earlier about film performance versus theater performance, right? We're living in an in-between world because we're developing our own kind of acting style for this, with this kind of like very colorful voice acting, but their faces are generally pretty, muted. They're not really expressing too much. And so I always felt like it was really interesting on camera. And so I thought, okay, one day, once we're finished the theater show, I'll try to make a web series or something. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like, okay, we have to do that first instead.
Web series first.
Yeah. So, and then Dan is as I said, he's already in the project doing the lights, and but he is a filmmaker too. So it was very easy. It was very, our company is built in such a way that we're able to switch mediums. To every show that we do is quite different from the others, and they take very different shapes than the others.
Well, that's a kind of the benefit of having a really well-rounded team of folks that can sort of, again, take hats on and off as need to, as a situation arises. So I guess if one could say you were lucky that you had a team in place that was like, hey, you know what, this is a new challenge, but let's just dive in. No pun intended with the dive.
It is, you know what, it is lucky. It is lucky that I had those folks around, but it's intentional, it's also intentional on our part to have a company that is able to do those kinds of shifts, so that we're not totally caught out when we need to do something different than we're used to. We're by design, we like to switch things up often.
Did the writing process, Conor, switch drastically between your concept as a stage play versus the concept of like now we're witnessing it in 3 sort of episodicals, 3 mini episodes? So how does the writing change? Because I think one of the things that, unless you're in the industry of theater making and filmmaking, there's a process there that folks aren't even when you said, you were in residency at theater replacement, like maybe not everybody knows what that means. So maybe you can unpack some of that stuff for us.
Well, firstly, then in residence means that, so they're a company that have been making work for, I don't know, probably like 15, 20 years now. And hope I didn't overshoot there. So the 2 artistic directors, Michael Yamamoto and James Long, and their staff, Corbin and Chelsea, have all kind of like helped me throughout the producing process and directing process. Jamie has come in and read the script. Michael has consulted on the form. They've really supported this project. And so they also presented it. They have an event annually called Push Off, in which works in progress and completed works get shown primarily to arts presenters, curators from different festivals and theaters, to come and see works and see what they like and potentially program them in their seasons. And they also supported me with funding, the very first funding for the project that allowed us to do the first rehearsal process, as well as rehearsal space. So they gave us everything that we needed for that first time around, and have continued to support me in all of those same ways since then. Okay, that was the answer to one part of the question. What was the other part of the question, Amy? Remind me.
I can't remember what I said 2 minutes ago, let alone 3 minutes ago.
Yes, I know. I remember.
You remember, right?
You're asking about writing for stage versus writing for screen, and I would say, this is a whole new writing process even for stage. I wrote it as a kind of play, but a play that was kind of based on sort of film language or a radio play, or the language doesn't work the same way that a usual play does, I think. So in some ways the style I stayed consistent from when I was writing it for the stage and when I pivoted to the miniseries. But as Donna totally mentioned rightly, I came in on that first week with a draft that had like 25, probably 25 characters, like so many minor characters, it was like a TV series. It was like a whole season of TV, really, A plot, B plot, C plot. And we spent that first week trying to stage it. And it became very apparent that it was like, oh no, no one is going to have any idea what the heck is going on here. It's not going to make any sense to anybody. And so I had a very painful, soul-searching couple of days. And then I was like, you know what I can do? I can write this as episodes. And I can rewrite these for episodes as we go. So I did a lot of rewriting on the fly. And so the first thing I wrote, I wrote that 3rd episode in a weekend. And then, So, I mean, all of the content, all of the story, all the backstory was already there. So it was like a lot of trimming and choosing and finding ways to transpose things. But I just instantly, I got the idea. I was like, oh, I know one episode, and one episode is the 2 sisters in their last day in their bodies before they cross over. And that for me just clicked. It's like, oh, I can do an episode. And then we can shoot it one episode at a time, and we can rehearse it one episode at a time. It was just like, that was an amount that we could bite off, and also an amount that I knew, I was like, when we watch it on our screens at home, we understand the episodic format. It's one thing to sit through an hour and a half consistent. I mean, we do it all the time when we binge stuff, but it's just like a digestible bite.
You need those, the small digestible chunks.
Yeah, with little hooks and stuff like that.
You had mentioned off the top, Conor, about this idea of it being the language being kind of like a radio play. And obviously there are visuals in this, but what the description tells us, what you tell us right off the top is that there's language in the play, there's dialogue and language that is not necessarily dependent on the action. But of course we had the action described because there is an aesthetic here, like a theatrical aesthetic. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your thought process around it being a little bit like a radio drama, and then how the action fits in to the aesthetic, because the action to me isn't necessarily about the storytelling per se, but more about the aesthetic, and maybe talk a bit about those two things.
Sure. Yeah. I knew that, okay, so this, I'll say first that there's someone, I didn't have this language for me at the time, but someone has since described this project in a way that is like, oh yeah, that's the kind of art I want to make all the time. And he said, he watched it, and he said, whoa, it's like you made a movie and then you turned it into a play and then back into a movie, but the movie's in my head.
You gotta keep that line for something for somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's the tagline everywhere now. Yeah. And that's exactly, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. And that kind of came from this experience of watching some kinds of minimalist theater in the past. There's one, these are just going to be some obscure-ish references, but there's a director from New York named Richard Maxwell who does these really minimalist plays with kind of like screenplay language, cinematic language. And my experience always watching it was like the actors were hardly doing anything, like visually, just standing there. But then you could hear it. You could hear the screenplay, and you'd imagine, I was like, oh, they should be in a bar right now. Oh, they should be, this guy should be, stirring his coffee. Like, I picturing what wasn't being shown to me, I love that experience. It's like kind of evocative. It's kind of like, also like reading a novel or something too, like do all that imaginative work yourself. And I'm really interested in experiences where the audience, rather than just being fed exactly what's going on, has a lot of guesswork to do, a lot of imagining themselves. So that's kind of like an inspiration for that format. And so, I really took, Richard Maxwell. I took some other artists like Robert Wilson as inspirations, or from the film world, someone like David Lynch as inspirations. But then I had a great team, and we discovered our own style inside of it, and a big part of that too is Mihaela Patterson O'Brien, who's the choreographer. She has a very distinctive style. You hear it described a bit about a lot of upper body movement, a lot of geometric like shapes and sort of like carving motions with the arms. It's kind of naturally got like a bit of a robotic feeling to it. And sort of once we started to combine aesthetics, and then just using my intuition too, wondering, it's like, and it just feels like it's a puzzle that always wants to be missing one piece.
Yeah.
So if you're hearing everything, you want to not see something, or if they're like not facing each other, then they can move their faces or something, it's just like some things they can do, but always something's missing, the machine's not totally all put together.
And that's done on purpose.
Yeah, it's done on purpose to keep that evocative state, to keep that kind of imaginative state where you're able to picture things yourself, or you're able to, connect the dots yourself. That's really the heart of the experience, I think, the movie in your head experience. And so, while I had those inspirations, I think with all the collaboration, understanding when the sound's going to come in, when the lights are going to come in, it just became its own aesthetic just through collaboration. And that's partly me making choices, and a whole lot of it is all of my collaborators and what they're offering.
Can you talk a bit about the lighting as part of the storytelling technique? I mean, I think this group probably can all recognize the sound as a part of
Yeah,
storytelling.
yeah.
The lighting is a visual thing, and Eileen did a great job in describing to us, when the lights would come on, when they were important to know. But talk to me a bit about the nature of the lighting design and how it fits in with the storytelling.
You bet. So the main well, I can tell you how it kind of came together too. Is that in the very first showing, I had told Dan, I was like, and this is like very low budget, right? We're just like, he's going to grab some things and we're going to try it out, right? And I was like, I had imagined this idea that it would be kind of like a really glitzy little showroom, but in a really falling apart warehouse. Just like some really slick package, but misplaced in the wrong side of town or something, And what he came up with was he just got 4 of these like industrial, they're actually for film, stand lights with tubes in them. They would be used on movie sets. They're like very, they themselves, you're not really supposed to see the instrument, it's kind of behind the scenes, right? It looks a bit industrial. And there was something about the simplicity of those. And then he had one tilted. It looked kind of like a tanning bed almost, like that felt like it offered this kind of eerie, cold light that just felt like it suspended everything inside of it without, so it kind of, the light made this kind of slickness, but the instruments themselves looked kind of crappy, and so that was kind of the baseline of it, and we use those, and they also those are the things that are creating the colors inside of it too. So we use color in a kind of evocative way. Often in the underground scenes, there's like a purple or green light or like a red light, and then more natural lights during some of the more natural memories. And then we have all these tubes kind of haphazardly spread out, and they strobe and they flicker. And Dan did these really cool things where he would get them to phase in and out. So it's kind of like this strobing effect, but rather than like a traditional strobing effect, which is like on and off, it keeps coming from different directions. So there was times when it started to look like the people were like paper cutouts or something performing. So it's kind of this combo of like, and it's also really fractured, which I think is representative of the nature of this piece too. Nothing really, it doesn't feel like it totally envelops the space. It's still like missing pieces. So it feels like kind of like machine-like, a bit sterile, represents the kind of like outer layer of the grove or the machines that are trying to operate what's going on.
Right. That makes sense. And of course, it's minimal enough so that sighted folks are painting the pictures in their minds of things. And like, I'd love to talk a bit about the description too, because you had, look, this piece would have been really hard to describe for anybody. And then you had come in and helped us a little bit with some of the language because of the nature of the sci-fi aesthetic, and to not give stuff away that wasn't supposed to be given away, and to these are my words, to hold our hands a little bit in moments that we need that hand holding, which I think is really, really nice. Like at the beginning when Eileen talks about the lights sort of simulating a laboratory, whereas in if you're in it isn't a laboratory, it's a black room with a bunch of lights, but in your mind, for those of us who aren't seeing that aesthetic, may need a little bit of extra hand holding to think, oh, we are in a laboratory. Okay, I know where we are in space and time. So talk to me a little bit about your relationship with writing description for this piece. And was this your first time working on description, or?
It was, yeah, it was. And if I think you mentioned it already, but if the audience didn't hear, I mean, you've been working with me on this piece, collaborating with me on this piece since 2019 too. And as I had said, the kind of like to get this movie in my head aesthetic, I really leaned a lot on you and some little tips you gave to me about embedded description or integrated description, trying to write it in, trying to write the actions into the lines themselves, trying to so that you to help facilitate that imagination a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And so since we started working, that was really a value of mine, and throughout, like trying to ensure that, you know, you could sort of, you know, that the sound would encapsulate as much of the story as possible. But then, and I think I feel really good about how that experience is on the whole. But yeah, and then once we got to the filming of it and the editing and, you know, coming together, you know, some things came together at the last minute. That's the case for everybody who was pivoting, I think. And so, yeah, there was definitely a few moments where it was like, oh, this is actually really represented visually, you know, some very key moments, you know. For one thing, that first scene is like not using that. It's not using that technique yet, the movie in my head thing, right? They're just doing these robotic gestures and you hear the operators talking and it's very fractured. So I think if you didn't have that extra description there, it might be very impermeable, you know, really hard to understand. And then key moment of Kawabi hugging Casey Esper at the end, that just happens in silence as she goes and hugs her, you know, these key story moments that need to be conveyed, that you know, in the end, once we got to the editing, that was the way, as we were editing, that those moments felt like they worked. But we recognized that only sighted audiences were going to get those experiences at the time, and so we wanted to open that up for everybody.
The whole production was shot social distanced, except for that last hug moment.
That's right.
Is this a COVID aesthetic, or is this something you had always thought about with this piece?
It's a bit of both, I think. It wasn't originally staged like that. There was like originally definitely moments where they would be like uncomfortably close together, staged in a way, you know, like the scene would not make sense that they would be like truly face to face, and yet they would perform the scene that way, you know, which is like one more layer of strangeness, you know. But then when it became apparent that we would have to stage everything distanced, it also felt really natural because of the kind of, there is a kind of distance, like a, I don't know, performance distance or emotional distance that exists inside of the piece, that felt like keeping them separate would make a lot of sense for it, and that once we had established that for the duration of the piece, that having a moment of touch, of intimacy, could be a very powerful moment of breaking that.
It gets me every time, every single time. And I've seen this quite a few times, as you know,
yeah.
But it gets me every time. Friends, I just want to remind you that we have Conor in the space. So if you have questions or comments, like Megan did, please use the raise your hand function and we'll call on you to put forth your questions or comments to Conor. Because I could go on, and I will until we have some hands, or if we, look, that you just ask again. Lori's got a hand. Go ahead, Lori.
It was very interesting. I normally don't care for sci-fi. It's not my thing that I like, but this was really interesting. And it was really well described also, I will say, because I listened to a lot of things that are described. But it was very different on how they dived in to get to the other side. I thought that was kind of interesting, how they did that and how that was described and everything. But it was a very good show.
Thanks, Lori, for your comment.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you. And I'm glad that even if you are not usually into sci-fi, that the story still resonated for you. That's really meaningful for me, because I think even though I'm working in the sci-fi genre, I don't want it to be just for people who, you know, who are really deep into that genre. I hope when I write something that there's still some sort of other emotional connection, whether it's a family connection or love connection, suspense, mystery connection, any entry point that you can take is,
those real human connections. You know, Donna sort of dotted that there might be some other things to come with this production. So
Yeah.
I don't know, what can you tell us? What's to come? And then we'll take another question after that. So go ahead, Connor.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so there's a bunch of exciting developments with this, and usually when we make a theater piece, my experience anyway is like, apply for you get a good idea, you get a great idea, you want to pitch it, you write a grant for it, you get some money, you pitch it to somebody to present it, and then it comes to its full life, and then you move on to the next thing. So I'm not used to getting the opportunity to continue working on, you maybe work on it to like improve it or make it more of what it is, but to expand it. But it felt like we really had an opportunity with the sci-fi universe. And so thanks to a Canada Council Digital Now grant, we're expanding it into 3 different mediums. So one is going to be kind of a virtual brochure for the Grove, which will have some sort of like informational diagrams about how the systems work. And also I'm going to be making a short animated advertisement for the Grove. There's a very exciting collaboration with an illustrator from Vancouver named Tita Kitsungden. We worked this morning. We're making a comic, like a 3-episode comic, and that will be a prequel. It will be charting the earlier life of Kawabi and Casey. And then Amy, you and I, and Dan and Nancy, and maybe some others will be working on we'll see. We're going to experiment, and we're going to play around with a kind of experimental audio description track, is what I've been saying, that will be kind of in-world. So this one is kind of like more traditional, or like one version of an established audio description form, in which Eileen offers her observations from a kind of third-party perspective, right? From a kind of audience perspective in a way.
Yeah, so I call it a witness description almost.
A witness description. That's right. That's right. And so we're going to play around with a few different options of in-world ones, so that rather than a witness, it might be someone like an operator who is trying to control the situation from the outside, who is observing the action, but also trying to control it, or has some personal stake inside of it.
So it's almost like writing the describer as a character in some way.
In a way, yeah. We're going to experiment with. That'll be one of the experiments, right? Yeah, and I think we might experiment with like robotic voices as well. Like there's a bunch of different possibilities of things, and we're going to play around and see what comes of it, what applications, and then
nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Yeah, totally. So
Right.
maybe it will be an interesting new way that we can describe our own work, or maybe others could learn from it, or maybe we'll listen to it and we'll be like, no, we like it the old way. Who knows?
Well, that's the whole idea of experimentation. But I just want to applaud you, first of all, because I know you as a human being, and I know that when we met in a space, access was important to you. And I had not experienced that in a lot of theater makers, that access was important to them. The world is changing a little bit, and I think the silver lining of the pandemic has put a lot of things digitally and opened up the world of the access discussion. But you and I met before that, so it was a real pleasure to be in a space with somebody who was like, wait a second, how can I make this accessible for everybody? So this idea of experimenting with creative access is like totally cool to me, because again, there aren't enough describers in the world to describe every piece of content. So at some point, artists need to take it upon themselves to figure out how they can integrate that into their work. So that's the big experiment, right?
If I would throw in a little thing about that, Amy, it's that it both feels important and valuable to invite new audiences into the work, and I'm like right now having everybody out there watching it means a ton to me, to have such an attentive audience, and also there are many ways in which collaborating with you and working in this way has enriched the project for everyone. There's many times I would say that having you in the room and being able to experience it side by side with you and understand what you were picking up and what you weren't and where it was taking you allowed me to change the writing, to change the story, so that it was strengthened and clarified for everybody. And that is, so it's not, it's not just a me to you thing. You gave a ton to that process for everybody. So, and I also want to say too that, though, I think we've made a thing that has made it more accessible for the VocalEye audience. Not for everybody, like, and I do think about deaf audiences, especially inside of this piece, when there's it's so there's so much audio focus inside of this that they're going to have a totally different experience. And I feel like, that's something I have that kind of like on my radar for the future and future projects too, of like, I don't know that this form, I'm not sure how I would adapt this form for those audiences, but it's a consideration. Yeah.
Right.
For the
and
future.
maybe another experiment. You never know.
Who knows? Yeah.
Let's take a hand from Louise, and then we have a hand from Sharon. Go ahead, Louise.
Hi, it was a total different experience because I don't know if you heard me earlier say, this was a whole new sort of idea for me this evening, also coming in and listening. But I had a problem, and maybe I don't know where, maybe I missed it or something, but I couldn't figure out why they were going after new bodies. Why the sisters. And maybe I missed something in the description. Maybe I missed something in the beginning. It could just be because I was trying to follow so strongly that you over missed something. I don't know if I missed it, or was it supposed to be a mystery?
Great question.
Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
I think it's some of those justifications are sort of like peppered throughout the story, but not like stated, totally outwardly. But I would say for me, as I conceptualize this, like I imagine this happening in maybe 30 to 50 years down the line, in a kind of like worst case climate disaster world where many parts of the world are uninhabitable. There's weather disasters, there's widespread hunger and conflict and war. And so it's just an increasingly difficult place to live in. In the case of Casey too, she has contracted some sort of disease that is that she's living with. And so these
I caught that part of it, but I couldn't figure out why why would the other sister go along with it? Yes, sisters, we bond and we want to help each other, but I didn't see the
why would they both?
Yeah.
Well, in the sort of sci-fi lore of this piece, in the crossing over and the dive, like the dive happens as a kind of joining of two brains, and so it has to be done with a partner. And so this idea that I have, you have to do it with somebody else, and it has to be someone with whom you have a strong enough bond to be able to engage in this kind of intense neurological connection. Someone who you could really do a deep personal, emotional, psychological dive with. So it's just sort of part of the I don't know, the lore or the tech of this thing, that you have to do it together. Two people have to do it together.
Okay, I guess that's why I was just wondering, was it's because I was thinking, did I miss something in the first few minutes that, trying to follow the sound effects? And
I think it's actually in episode 3. When we learned that, Louise.
And I was listening so hard, and I guess it's just, sometimes you're listening for other things. You don't hear everything when you see it the first time, I guess, or hear it the first time.
It is a challenge too with like for folks who haven't experienced a lot of sci-fi to put yourself.
No, I have never done it before.
To put yourself into those shoes and then try and retain everything. I too, the first time I watched it, was like, I need to see that again.
Yeah, it's pretty dense. It's pretty dense. Yeah.
So I'm glad I'm not the only one. Okay, I feel a little bit better now. I like.
Kind of what we said at the beginning. If you're a little confused, so is everybody. It's kind of a,
Okay.
it could be a
Yeah, I know
universal
you
experience.
said that, but I'm thinking, okay, I've missed the principle of it. I thought a little bit.
Thank you, Louise, for sharing your thoughts with us. It's really important to have this.
And it was really good, though. I really enjoyed a lot of it. You did a fantastic job, Colin, and to get it on to do it the way you did it is fantastic.
Thanks, Louise. Thank you very much. And thank you for paying such close attention. That's exactly the kind of audience one wants for their work. Yeah.
Louise has a memory like an elephant. She like remembers the day and time that her and I met. It's incredible. It's like
Nice.
every time I'm in a space with Louise and she throws out dates, I'm like, how do you remember that? Sharon, let's get a comment or a thought from Sharon.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations. Quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
So I had two questions. So did you do the sound and the lighting design, or were those different people?
Different people. Yeah, different people. That's so I wrote and directed the piece.
Yeah.
The lighting design was by Daniel O'Shea. He also was the director of photography, like sort of the lead filmmaker. And the sound design was by Nancy Tam. So she did all the sound design and music, anything that you heard other than those two voices, that was all Nancy. And the three of us together, we are a collective called A Wake of Vultures. So, and this project is a Wake of Vultures project. And we do a variety of different kinds of performances. But no, I am definitely not a sound guy and definitely not a lighting guy. Not my area of expertise.
So in the writing direction, would you say I'm thinking of this kind of sound, or she would read it and come up with her own sound? I mean, it was quite impressive.
A combo, I think. A combo. In some cases I heard it, and sometimes Nancy just sort of created it on the fly, or she had her own ideas about it. We had a lot of like, now we've been working together for between I think about eight or 9 years, something like that. And we have a real like, we like to work in a way that where we jam, you know. In a lot of theater processes, it's like the designers come in at intervals or something, or like the design is one of the later things that gets integrated into the piece. But that's not the case with the Wake of Vultures project. It's like everybody's there from the start, and in some cases, you know, you got to let the sound lead. You know, like if Nancy made a cool sound, it's like, okay, I'm gonna find a place to put that in the project. So I think it's a combo. Sometimes I'd be like, Nancy, I hear this thing. Can we have this kind of sound in here? And in many cases, we just kind of get in, she'd start jamming, she'd make something cool, and then we would run with that. So it's a real back and forth, I would say. Same with the lighting too. Yeah.
That was great. And then at some points, I think kind of maybe in the beginning, it seemed that the actors' voices were fairly quiet, low. I guess, and I never know if that was intentional or if it was at my end. Was that intentional at your end? That you really had to listen, I thought, to hear the actors speak.
I thought there was maybe a volume bump that happened after a little while at the beginning. I think no, that's a good note. I think like I do want you to be able to like kind of lean in and listen and pay attention, but it shouldn't be too much of a struggle to hear it. So I would say it's a good note, and maybe I'll give it a listen and see if we need to bump it up in places.
I wasn't sure, and also, you know, you never know with the technology. Like
yeah, totally.
Sometimes that's the nature of Zoom too, that the audio isn't always perfectly translated. But
thank you for doing this. It was really quite something. So thank you for spending time with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well,
I love to talk to people.
Thanks for joining us in the future. It's tomorrow for you, Sharon.
Yes, so. It is. Yes, hello from the future. I know.
Yeah, hello from the future. Yeah, Sharon's joining us from New York City.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there you go. So we have a wide scope. I think we had Stuart on with us. He might still be on, if I'm remembering correctly. Stuart's from Japan. So
oh wow.
Yeah, we got quite an audience gathered tonight, Connor. Thank you so much for spending time in this space. It's really wait a second. I'm seeing one more hand.
Yeah.
We got time for one more hand, Connor. You can stick around for
one more hand. For sure.
Okay, Barbara, I see your hand. Go ahead, my friend.
Hi. Okay. Also from New York City, and I also had the problem in the beginning. I had a Zoom really increase my volume on my computer
Mm-mm.
to hear the actor speaking. So that might be something you need to check. And then I'm also not a fan of sci-fi usually, but I thought it was fabulous.
Oh, wonderful.
You got some converts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad.
Yeah, my other question is, at the end when Eileen was reading all the credits, she mentioned Craig Bierko. Is that Craig Bierko that I've seen on Broadway, the same Craig Bierko?
Oh, no, not Craig Bierko, Craig Boyko.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, Craig Boyko's Craig Boyko's great. He is one of the caretakers of the Russian Hall, where we did a lot of our rehearsing and creation there. He's also a really wonderful author. He writes a bit of sci-fi himself. So he had come to watch a few times, and is just a really great person to have around. So not Craig Bierko from Broadway, though.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was very, very good.
Barbara, you were name dropping just a little bit, but I love it. Because I wouldn't have recognized that name from Broadway, but living in New York, yes, of course you would. Sharon, you've got your hand up again. Is that a leftover hand, or is that just one more quick question?
It's a leftover hand. Actually, I thought I checked to make sure my hand was down. I must have put it up.
We also put it down for you, so maybe we put it down and you put it back up again. So.
Who knows?
Who knows? Awesome. Conor, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us, for spending time, for bringing us this piece, for making it accessible, and for spending time with us to, chat a bit about it with the community. It's been really great having you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure and very enriching for me. I'm really glad to truly, it's a really little project, right? We're just a little indie company. There's the three of us in A Wake of Vultures, and then half dozen other folks that worked on this, and having 30, 40 people experience it with us means the world to me, because I just want our art to be experienced by other people. And so thank you for watching it and sticking around and talking about it.
Well, before we let you go, we have a tradition in this space of doing a prize draw every night. I wonder if you'd be interested in taking part in that. In fact, I'm not wondering. I'm just going to force you to
I can't see why I wouldn't want the prize unless it was like a really bad prize. No.
Well, so here's how it works. We bring Donna into the space, and Donna's got a list of names of folks who are in the room with us tonight. And all you got to do is she's shuffling the names, and all you got to do is you can yell stop, or you can yell something more creative.
Okay.
I'm actually curious to see what you might come up with. So I'm going to leave you in Donna's hands.
Okay, great.
Shaky, shaky.
Halt.
It is Maria C.
It's Maria Gucci. Maria's won a raffle prize. Congratulations, Maria. We'll connect with you via email to figure out how to get you your prize. So there you go. That was painless, right?
It's so exciting. Thrilling.
Thanks, Maria. I hope you enjoyed it tonight.
It was different.
It's different. It is different.
Well, Maria lives here locally, so when it comes maybe as a stage production, we'll have to go see it. We can compare these different ways of experience this kind of art form, right?
That's right. And that was the one actually other medium that I didn't get to mention. I mentioned all the other ones that we're kind of doing spin-offs on, but yeah, we're going to be doing a live production. Finally, it'll finally have its life as a live production in the theater that it was meant to have its life in the Shadbolt, where it was shot in the spring of 2022. So I'm very excited. Yeah.
It's exciting stuff, Conor. Thank you again for joining us in this space. It's been a real delight to have you with us tonight. So thanks for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.